Behnam, it boggles the mind, and Dan and I talk about this so often, which is on so many questions, the United States seems to have very little leverage. We're talking about that, of course, with regards to oil prices. We're talking about that with regards to the gas market. But when it comes to Iran, as you say, they gained a lot of leverage. And it's not just with regards to what's happening internally in that country, but when you look at Hezbollah and Lebanon, when you look at the fact that Saudi Arabia, as the foreign minister just told me a week or so ago at the G20, is talking to Iran and plans to continue talking to them, one wonders who's sitting pretty at this point. Is it Tehran?
Well, the Iranians certainly know that the ball is in their court. And one reason why, despite all the offers and all the entreaties and all the extended hands for diplomacy and all the unenforced sanctions that are already on the books by Washington, by the Biden administration in particular, the reason there is no resurrected JCPOA to date is not because of President Biden or his national security team. It's because of really one man, and that's Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And that's a title meant to be taken rather literally. He's seeking to extort the U.S. He wants the U.S. to somehow atone for leaving the JCPOA, which is why you have all this talk of pledges. These are really masks for premature sanctions relief for cash up front. But analytically, if you ask me, it was the current administration in Washington that squandered the leverage. Ultimately, macroeconomics do matter, even for revolutionaries. And if you enforce oil sanctions, you add to extra oil sanctions and enforce sanctions on Iranian activities in the region, be it against militias, be it against the drone industry, be it against the militias, and be it against the missile program. Ultimately, Tehran is going to have to talk. Lest we forget, it was pressure that brought them to the table in 2013 and 2015. But now that Tehran understands that Washington wants a deal for political reasons more than it needs a deal for economic reasons, it now is flipping the leverage, as you mentioned.
Behnam, US officials that have spoken to us in recent weeks have suggested that the ball is going to continue to be in Iran's court. The US saying it wants Iran to come back to the negotiation table. But with that late November start date for talks to resume, what does the timeline actually look like now? Because this is going to run into December. That means we're going to break for the end of the year. It's obviously very unlikely that the US is going to be able to get an Iran deal in 2021. What does the 22 timeline look like?
Well, again, the timeline depends on what the goals are. If Iran continues to enrich, continues to accumulate, continues to violate while these talks, these indirect talks go on, then it means that the timeline will be kicked down the road for something like JCPOA reentry. And I'm glad you mentioned 2022, because that would mean that Washington and other countries would be only 1 year away from the next major sunset that exists in the accord they're trying to resurrect, which is 2023. That pertains to missile limitations found in UN Security Council Resolution 2231 that enshrines and codifies this deal. So regardless of this back and forth, there are other political and technical clocks that are ticking that play to Iran's advantage over time. But one thing is for certain, the Biden administration's serious attempt at diplomacy and Iran's serious rejection of that diplomacy could allow the Biden administration to push for a more multilateral pressure policy in 22 if Tehran continues to stall or continues to ask for guarantees or continues to ask for more of these upfront types of sanctions relief.
Behnam, just on another issue, when you look at the attempted assassination of the Iraqi leader on Sunday, isn't it the case that perhaps Iranian drones present more of a threat to the region today than its nuclear program? Making an assumption there, no group has claimed responsibility for this attack, but
the
fair to say, I think.
commander as the first person on the ground. What does that say to you?
It certainly says that Iran does not treat, or the government of the Islamic Republic does not treat the border that exists there as an actual border. And in many ways, it's the success of Tehran's foreign security policy to be able to penetrate the security forces, the politics, the economics, the society, and even the religious institutions of its next door neighbor. It is beyond chutzpah, or chutzpah on steroids, you could say, for the head of the IRGC Quds Force to go to Iraq the day after, or a day and a half after, militias aligned to Tehran launched, according to Reuters, these drones, basically doing an assassination attempt on the Iraqi prime minister. Make no mistake, what happened there is these pro-Iran militias, which have been protesting for over a month now in Iraq, are trying to win through fear, escalation, and intimidation what they did not win through the ballot box with the October elections. But to the heart of your question, Dan, about drones, this is really just one tool in the broader spectrum of unmanned aerial threats. Threats that Tehran procures from abroad, produces at home, and proliferates into its near abroad. So these are rockets, missiles, mortars, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, even if you look at the Houthis in Yemen. And this is the full spectrum from conventional to non-conventional threats. And a nuclear weapon would make these threats even more lethal.